Michael Rubin is a former Pentagon official and a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, joining us from Washington, D.C. Michael, thanks a lot for your time. You've been following this, relationship problem that India and Canada are seeing because of the allegations and the very public allegations that Justin Trudeau has made against India in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who India considers, of course, a terrorist. I want to begin by asking you, do you think this entire episode can help India actually shine a light on how a lot of the Khalistani separatist movement is actually being sheltered in Canada, and how a lot of these elements are getting support in Canada because the world may not actually be fully aware of that?
I think it already has. I mean, for one, the news that we're seeing in the United States, for example, are reminders of what happened with regard to, for example, Air India 182, Canada's worst terrorist attack ever. And so the term Khalistani is now much more in the public discourse, and frankly, it should be, because also, of course, in the United States, we've had the attacks on the consulate in San Francisco, the vandalization, and the more we turn a blind eye to this, the more they will increase until someone in the United States also gets hurt.
What is the general feeling in America, though? How are they looking at this? Do they feel that India also has a just point about the concerns that it has been raising for decades, in fact, about Khalistani separatists and separatist movement being sheltered in Canada?
Well, when it comes to the American public, of course, this crisis caught them by surprise. Americans aren't very well informed about this issue. When we look at what the Biden administration is doing and saying, it's clear through their body language, through parsing their statements, that they want this to go away. They don't want to hurt the feelings of either Canada or India. But for example, if we compare this situation to the situation that occurred between Turkey and Saudi Arabia, even though Saudi Arabia was a staunch US ally of the United States didn't hesitate to come down hard against Saudi Arabia. The fact that we're not doing that with regard to India suggests that behind the scenes, we're probably telling Justin Trudeau, you've made a mistake here. You don't have the evidence. Even his own premier in British Columbia says you don't have the evidence, and therefore perhaps it's time you back off.
But there are statements coming in which are suggesting that the Five Eyes intelligence was shared with Canada, and possibly US intelligence was also shared with Canada, and that was the basis why Justin Trudeau went public. Now, keeping aside this fact that he went public with it, do you feel that the US would have shared something, or the Five Eyes countries are aware of what Justin Trudeau is talking about?
Well, first of all, they may have. I haven't seen the intelligence. I can say that when I worked in the Pentagon, I was an intelligence consumer. I would receive intelligence, for example, from the Central Intelligence Agency or the National Security Agency, and oftentimes that intelligence is less than meets the eye. It's always open to interpretation. Number two, you don't expose that intelligence unless you don't make a public accusation on that intelligence, unless you're willing to expose that intelligence. And so it seems that Justin Trudeau caught his own intelligence apparatus by surprise. Perhaps there wasn't consistency in terms of interpretation. Perhaps they weren't willing to expose it. I personally happen to wonder whether part of this is personal in Justin Trudeau's case, simply because of what occurred under his father, Pierre Trudeau, who had dismissed India's extradition request for Talwinder Singh Parmar before the India Air 182 attack. And it almost seems that Justin Trudeau has a bit of a personal stake, a personal grievance here that is being played out in a very unprofessional way.
I'm going to come back to the question of how Canada has looked at Khalistani separatists in just a bit. But on the question of America, there's also a sense here in India that this could very well be shadow games by the American establishment, be behind Canada and do this not publicly, to keep India in check. That ultimately Western countries have been playing this game with India. If it's not in Kashmir and Pakistan, then it's on Khalistan. And this could be one of those games. As a former intelligence member, would you agree that that could be the case?
Well, first of all, I used intelligence. I wasn't part of the intelligence community, but putting that aside, I don't think the United States policymaking is that orderly. I don't think we're that directive. We tend to be reactive rather than proactive. I suspect what the U.S. strategy here, first of all, it's a good thing if people are paying attention to Najjar, even before his murder, because it shows that even if Justin Trudeau didn't take him seriously, others took him seriously. But beyond that, I suspect what the United States strategy is going to be to slow roll this, figuring that if Justin Trudeau loses his election, then the whole matter could go away and that Canada and India could get a fresh start.
But this is in no ways a machination to keep India in check, a growing power, while US, UK may not be able to do so publicly, and of course they are hailing India. This is not a backroom maneuvering or machination.
On the part, I can't speak on behalf of the United Kingdom or Canada, but on the part of the United States, I really don't think so. In fact, the US-India relationship is refreshing because it is so bipartisan. It has such bipartisan support. What else can you get George W. Bush, President Obama, President Trump, and President Biden agreeing on? There's absolutely nothing other than the desire for a strong US-India partnership. So I really don't believe that the United States that there's an American hidden hand behind this. If anything, the Americans are increasingly frustrated that Justin Trudeau is making an issue of this and distracting from the broader focus of the development of our relations, both strategically, economically, as well as the greater threats that exist in the world.
Michael, you've written about how Khalistani sympathizers and secessionists have found shelter in Canada, and how Canada is the weak link as far as terror financing and terror funding, clamping down on terror funding in the world is concerned. Could you tell us more of what you found, and why do you think, particularly in Canada, the Sikh separatist movement is finding so much political support?
Well, first of all, with regard to your previous question, this is where I would actually agree with you that perhaps the United States, not perhaps, the United States and Canada and many in the West do embrace double standards. For example, when it comes to identification of terrorists, when it comes to terror finance. When we look at the Financial Action Task Force, which an international body which monitors terror finance, if we're going to use consistent standards, absolutely, Canada should be on the gray list, if not the blacklist, because of what it's been allowing to happen with regard to Khalistani extremism. You have, the Khalistani extremist movement, one thing which diplomats need to understand is not every separatist movement is legitimate. Let me make an example. I'll put on my history nerd cap to the Katanga separatism in Congo. That was wholly financed by Belgian financiers who wanted a cut of the copper income. In this case, when we hear about the Khalistanis, it's important to recognize that the only people who are interested in Khalistani separatism are few activists overseas, mostly in Canada, perhaps a few in California, but not in India itself. And we need to recognize just how illegitimate this movement is. Unfortunately, Canada has not been. Justin Trudeau, in this case, he's losing an election. There's Sikhs and Khalistani activists in very specific swing districts. He's basically throwing international relations and Canada's moral standpoint under the bus for the sake of cheap politics.
You spoke about double standards and hypocrisy. Now, another thing this episode is shining a light is on taking out enemical targets on foreign soil. A lot of people in India and around the world are talking about that even if India was behind the Najjar killing, someone who's prescribed a terrorist in India, what is so wrong about it when countries like US and others have also taken out targets on foreign soil?
Well, I'm not a diplomat, so let me call it as I see it. I think in this case, the Indians are absolutely right. I haven't seen evidence to suggest that the Indians took out Najjar, but I'll be the first one to say in the United States that if they did, more power to them. Najjar was a terrorist. He had blood on his hands. Now, I don't want to be morally equivalent and say that every country can take out its adversaries in every other country, but I'll make an exception for democracies. The United States is a democracy, and we did it. India is a democracy. And the key thing with both the United States and India is this isn't the tool of first resort. India tried extradition. India tried diplomatic mediation. And Justin Trudeau was irresponsible. I don't care who the Prime Minister of India is, it's the job of a democratically elected Prime Minister to protect their people. And that's what Prime Minister Modi was doing in this case. if he were indeed involved. But again, I've seen no evidence to suggest that. That's what the United States has done when it took out Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi or Qasem Soleimani or Osama bin Laden. It's different than the Iranians coming or the Pakistanis coming and assassinating, for example, in Pakistan's case, allegedly Karima Baluch in Toronto. And again, Justin Trudeau has to explain why he's been so silent in that case.
Absolutely. Well, the question of China has also been raised by the leader of opposition and the interference from China that has been going on for many, many years. In conclusion, do you feel, Michael, that this entire episode has actually could help strengthen India's case internationally on Khalistani terrorism and extremism, and actually has ended up embarrassing or hurting Justin Trudeau more instead of giving him any benefit?
Well, the irony of this is when I read the Indian press, the general sense is Justin Trudeau is over his head. When I read the Canadian press, the general sense is Justin Trudeau is in over his head. I mean, there's remarkable consistency about that, but I do think that the silver lining here, as you say, is that there's a growing realization that counter-terror cooperation means not simply India or other countries supporting the United States and Canada, but the relationship has to go both ways. And certainly there's no difference between Khalistani separatism, Al-Qaeda separatism, and other transnational separatism that targets civilians and doesn't have the popular legitimacy back home. So yes, I think there's a silver lining there.
Thank you. Michael Rubin, thanks a lot for speaking to CNN News 18.
Thank you.